Welcome back to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm Ollie Hayes, and today I'm joined by Joe Thomas from the Echo. And today we're going to be talking about Everton's end of the season, what securing our safety means, and a little bit on 777 and where that takeover is going and sort of the basic gist of that for the next couple of weeks, just to put you Evertonians at rest and just to put your minds at ease. But Joe, how you doing, mate? How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Much better after last week, and still a
Yeah.
little bit surprised, really. I had some hopes for last week, but I wasn't expecting to be quite as emphatically positive as it ended up being. So, still a little bit kind of, I don't know, in pleasant shock from what we saw.
I think we all are, aren't we? It felt like a dream, didn't it? Especially after that Brentford game, securing our safety. It felt like a dream. And then obviously the Merseyside derby in the middle of the week, getting that over the line and getting one over Liverpool, stopping them from winning the league and keeping us in the Premier League. It felt like a dream, didn't it? But yeah, as I said before, a top week and it secured our Premier League safety. And I think that's what all Evertonians wanted, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that and the bonus would have been a derby win. Doing it in style like they did, and they couldn't have done it any better, could they? I
Mm,
think it was history. Like, I mean, it shouldn't be. Should have far more nights like that at Goodison Park, and hopefully there will be at
mm.
the new stadium. But it was definitely special, and it felt. It was an interesting thing try and sum all that up in words at the time. You got the stadium going mad around you, and you're there, and you think, I've got 1,000 words of a landmark moment here. Or everyone's going mad around you. You got to somehow try and make sense of it. Felt a lot of pressure at that
No,
point.
I have to say you did that very well, and
Thank you.
I think a lot of Evertonians obviously love all your work and what you say about the club. And for me, it was difficult for myself just with my family and stuff like that, summing that game up into words. It's the first time I've ever seen Everton beat Liverpool in person in
Yeah.
16 attempts. That was the 16th Merseyside derby I've attended, and that was the first
Wow.
time I've seen us win one. So yeah, just I sort of want to get a basic gist on how Sean Dyche was feeling on that. Obviously, you get the in the know with the press conferences, and you get the first hand experience of speaking to Sean Dyche and how he deals with those results. And just I want to sort of get a gist of what him and the staff are thinking after that, and just sort of that week. How do you come down from that massive week of performances, three home wins in a row, and sort of attack this Luton game and try and get another 3 points on the board?
Yeah, I don't think they've come down yet. I think honestly, I mean, I know, and we'll get onto this. Obviously, there's been some more off the field chaos.
Mm,
Not to put it too lightly this week, but I think it was clear from press conference yesterday again that they're still in a very good mood. The feel good factor is still alive at Finch Farm. I think there's no doubt this has been a very tough season. Uh,
mm,
in the aftermath of the Chelsea game, I think Finch Farm was a very difficult place. I think there was a lot of
mm,
frank conversations that were had, between management and players, and between players themselves. Deitch in particular, I think, kind of almost went on the offensive a little bit and was trying to say that if you ask him about that performance, he'll make reference to similar performances at difficult times during recent years under different managers.
mm,
And he tried to draw a link between them and basically says, if life's hard under me and you want to get rid of me, you're not going to do it. I'm staying, so you may as well put up with it
mm.
or do whatever you want. And obviously, that was a gamble. And I think it's a gamble that I don't think he knew whether it was going to work or not. If I'm honest, speaking to him, ahead of the Forest game, the first in that three, and obviously the first after that Chelsea game. I mean, I was there at Stamford Bridge after the game, and asking him whether or not he was embarrassed and angry and what went wrong and things like that. I mean, that was a tough experience, I think, for both me and for
Yeah.
Deitch. Um, and then I think the pre-match stuff going into Forest, I think there was a little bit of nerves. Really, I noticed a difference in the way he was coming across. I think he kind of felt the weight of pressure, and there's a bit of uncertainty really about how Everton were going to end up dealing with
Mm,
last week. Three big games at Goodison Park, obviously fate in their own hands, but a sense of what might, how are they going to react to Chelsea? Reaction couldn't have been any better in the end. And I think that what you've seen, certainly from a backroom staff perspective, a move from a group of professionals who are perhaps, if not doubting themselves and their own ability, perhaps doubting what the answers would be to the questions that they were posing to those players,
mm,
to one that, you know, certainly after Forest, definitely after Liverpool, became one of almost a lot of satisfaction and to a certain extent a vindication, a belief that obviously they played it right and they proved themselves and they proved themselves right. They proved their doubters wrong and delivered a positive response in the most emphatic way. And I think that's it. I think there's almost still a little bit of surprise at Finch Farm that Everton have gone from the aftermath of Chelsea and what that suggested about what the rest of the season would entail to being safe, and not just being safe, but being safe and having the outpouring of emotion they've been able to have,
Mm.
particularly after the derby. I think there's still a little bit of shock and surprise. Obviously, it's all pleasant, but
Yeah, yeah.
I think everybody was expecting to be going to Kenilworth Road on Friday night
Mm.
with a big 6 pointer in the relegation battle, and nobody not being quite sure what was going to happen and what
Mm.
the impact of that game would be. And now Everton get to go with it, knowing they're going to be a Premier League club. And whilst there are still things to play for, and there's still contracts to be played for and things like that, um, they're now going there knowing that the pressure is off, and no one expected that. And I think everyone is pleased about it.
Oh, 100%. I think after that Chelsea game, as an Evertonian being in that away end, I think that was probably, I want to say that was rock bottom as a fan for the last 3, 4 years. You look at the Lampard tenure, you look at the Rafa Benitez tenure. I picture back being in the away end at Carrow Road after Rafa Benitez's 2-1 defeat there, which ultimately brought an end to his spell at the club. I think that for me, that Chelsea game was probably rock bottom as a fan because you didn't really know where to turn. There wasn't a clear path out of a relegation battle, and it almost looked like for me we were going into another battle that would go to the final day of the season. And then you're looking at the fixture list, you're thinking, as you said, you go into Kenilworth Road, it could be a 6 pointer. I think Luton would have been bang if it was still in the relegation battle. Obviously, Everton would have had to go there knowing they would need a 3 points to get away from that relegation battle. Luton would
Mm.
have been bang up for it with it being a home game, and they would harness the home crowd to try and drag their players over the line. I think it would have been a real, it would have been a real precarious situation for me going, if we didn't have that last week of the highs of Forest, Liverpool, and Brentford, it would have been a real place to go, Kenilworth Road. So I think a lot of things have gone right in the last week, and I think Dyche has to take some credit for me because he has changed, and a lot of fans and me included. I remember saying after the Chelsea game, I said it on the Toffee Blues as well in my extra time video. I said that Dyche is very stubborn in his ways. He's very set in his ways, and he didn't really show much liking to change. I think that's a lot of Everton fans all season have said that Dyche hasn't really wanted to change too much, and that's just the way he is. I think he is a disciplinarian. He is very set in his ways, and he likes to do that. But for me, going into the Nottingham Forest game, even the little things. I know a lot of Everton fans are raving about this tracksuit change now, and just the little things. I think for me, it's shown that Dyche is a little bit more willing to make that change and a little bit more willing to roll his sleeves up and get involved with the squad and say, no, I'm here for the long haul. I'm here to get stuck in, and you're not getting rid of me that easy, sort of thing. So I think that the staff and Dyche do have to take some credit there. I think they have made some decent changes, and it all culminated in that week that kept us away from the relegation battle and secured our safety for another season.
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, I actually think it's less about the change and more about the consistency of what he's doing. He spoke a lot this season about sticking to plans, and when things go wrong, if you do the right things for long enough, eventually things will pay you back. And I
Mm.
think that was probably an element of what we saw last week, really, with the 3 wins. Obviously, he didn't change dramatically. I mean, he brought a few new players in against Forest compared to the Chelsea. I think he had to do that, really. And
Mm.
obviously, we saw a little bit of a reconfiguration of how he set up his centre midfield. But one thing that he's always been clear of, and this was most apparent perhaps when we look back to Wolves and Fulham, those defeats at the beginning of
Mm.
the season. And I mean, it seems a long time ago, but getting bored with XG and stuff like that, all those things, as difficult as they are to stomach when you're losing games, those metrics do exist for a reason. And whilst they're not the be all and end all, they do have some value. So I think it's important to remember that even when times were tough, Everton was still doing some good things well. They
Mm.
perhaps just weren't getting the luck around some of it, and they don't have the quality. Yeah, that's it. Like Deitch is obviously a manager that appears set in his ways, but if you look at what he has at his disposal at Everton, and similar to Burnley, there isn't really a lot he could do differently. I don't think. That isn't a squad there which gives you a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D. And when
Mm.
you layer onto that some of the injuries that he's had, then that also makes things very, very difficult to change. So it's an interesting one, really, as to whether or not last week came from changes or if it actually just came from the same things, almost paying off a little bit better. Like that performance against Liverpool was it was, I think, a style of performance that where in some respects you're used to seeing under Dyche. They just got everything right.
Mm,
It was the best. I think that was the best version of a Sean Dyche Everton side that you're going to see. And I think the question has been, why haven't we seen more of that, and why don't we see that more often? Against some of the lesser teams, particularly at Goodison Park, because we know that they got them in. That we know they've got that performance in them. But I thought it was the best performance under Dyche probably since, certainly at home, since the Arsenal game, his first game of the season.
yeah.
Um, and it'll be interesting to see what Dyche does this summer, really, in terms of Dyche isn't going to have a lot of money to be able to change things. But what we will probably see over the course of this summer is quite a significant turnover in players. And it'll be
Mm,
interesting to see what Dyche and Kevin Farwell do if they have that opportunity. Now, again, not just how much money they've got to spend, how much money they've got to offer in contracts, but also how much clarity they have over what they can do and how much of a head start in preparations they get is all going to be key to that. But it will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what Dyche will ever do if he ever gets a chance to kind of properly build a squad there at Everton,
mm,
because he often. I know he takes it very personally. This idea that he only likes to play in a certain way and it's some sort of archaic dinosaur football. He's probably not had the opportunity yet to show that he can do or wants to do anything different. I'd be very interested to see if that opportunity ever comes his way,
mm,
whether or not he does move away from it and whether he does have any success in that. But those are probably conversations for another day. I think
yeah.
you know we can all just bask in a bit of the afterglow. I think of last week. So I think again, with Forest, I think Everton were the better side against Forest, but that was also a game that very easily could have gone the other way.
Mm,
It was two long
definitely,
range
yeah.
goals. The initial, refereeing decisions. Now, I think the first two were the right calls, but we have seen how many times have we seen this season Evan go the wrong side of those 50. For me,
Yeah.
that was, if it was any luck, it was luck coming back. It wasn't
Yeah,
new
yeah.
luck that Everton were getting, and they're going to get. It's going to come back to haunt them in future games. That was luck Everton were owed.
Yeah,
Then you
definitely,
also
yeah.
have things like you have things like Pickford's wonderful save from Chris Wood at the end of
Mm,
the first half as well. Game could have gone a different way very easily. Luckily, it didn't. And I think what they really deserve credit for is once they got that win over Forest, obviously there's still a lot to do this season, but they really took hold of it. They really kind
mm,
of built on it and used it as a platform. So all the positives that they took from that result, as tight as it might have been, they were able to just exploit the pressure that released. Not all of it, but a little bit, and really, really take it on going into the derby. I think that's where they deserve real credit. The fact that the ground a bit of a win over Forest, and then they were so quickly able to put Chelsea behind them
mm.
that it kind of powered them through to a performance in the derby where Liverpool just couldn't cope with them. They couldn't
Yeah,
handle
yeah.
them, and it was so like so incredible to see an Everton side do that to
Mm, yeah, yeah.
a top Liverpool. Everton deserved to win that, and it was. I mean, yeah,
It was an unreal night, wasn't it? And I think that again, as you said, the players and the staff have to take credit there for the quick
yeah,
turnaround after Nottingham Forest, going from the high of Nottingham Forest winning a relegation six-pointer, and then going into a Merseyside derby where the intensity has to be as high, if not even higher, to compete with a Klopp team. So I think they have to take every credit for that, and as well, Dyche has to take some credit for the whole season as it was, because it has been backs to the wall. There's no denying that in terms of transfers, in terms of money surrounding the club, or the financial situation, the ownership situation. It has been backs to the wall, and there's been so much. I don't want to use a Dyche cliche, but there has been so much noise off the pitch, hasn't there? In terms of non-footballing noise, and you know, a lot of managers wouldn't be able to take that on, and would have that negative press, and use that negative press as an excuse almost. I think there was, towards the end of that difficult run, towards the end of that 14 game winless run, I think there was, a little bit of excuses popping up, using that as an excuse, whereas you might not have seen Dyche talking about that at the start of that 14 game run, which I think was only natural. I think all season we know we've had this looming over us, and we know that the points deductions and the ownership situation has been looming over them. We know that's going to have an adverse effect on the players. There's no denying that. But the way that they used that after the Chelsea game made positive changes in terms of how they approach games. Obviously, the continuity of what they've done all season, going into that week and putting the Chelsea game behind them and using that to beat Nottingham Forest and then go into an even better performance against Liverpool. I thought that was really pleasing to see, and every credit to them.
Yeah, no, it certainly was. It certainly was, and it just, that winless run was bad. 4 months
Mm,
without a win, 4 months without a win at home. It started off okay. Some of those performances, they were tough games. I was at Spurs just before Christmas, and
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
deserved to win that. Like that was, that ended the good run of form that came before that. But it didn't feel. It felt like another step forward
Mm,
that game, and you look back at. I mean, obviously, the one is Gomez's foul leading to Calvert-Lewin's
mm,
goal. This has been disallowed. The one that for me, I just can't get my head around is how Onana didn't get a penalty for
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
foul in the box from Kulusevski when Kulusevski got penalised a couple of days later for
Mm,
doing it. Like it's just like I said earlier, Everton haven't had any luck when it's come to
yeah, yeah,
decisions this season. That was that. And then you had it was good performance times to Man City. We forget that Everton were
yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
were 1-0 up at half time. That
And
first
away
half
as
they were
well.
brilliant.
And away,
Um,
I thought we played well at
yeah,
Man
that's it.
City.
I think by like they were finding new ways to kind of throw away games. When you look
Mm,
at West Ham when they missed so many chances, including that penalty, but then couldn't hold on in stoppage time. You look at
mm,
Brighton, 1-0 up against 10 men going to stoppage time, threw that away. You look at Bournemouth, get a huge
yeah,
slice
yeah,
of
yeah.
luck in stoppage time with the better equaliser, and somehow conspire to lose that. But they kept battling. We know it's a challenge with that squad because there aren't many players. So if you get a combination of injuries and players out of form, and you know, this is clearly a side where confidence matters. You look at they've done everything in trends, haven't they? They've done everything in
Mm,
in runs this season. They started off the season without getting a win for a while, then they got it and they had a great away form. Then we had that mad week, that mad four
yeah,
games of the wins in a row. Then we have 13 without a win, and then all of a
yeah.
sudden you have 3 wins in a row last week. That seems to be a theme of this season. I suppose it's probably natural when you don't have the personnel to kind of make wholesale changes to a squad.
Mm,
They're probably more susceptible to the emotions and the roller coaster ride of a season because it's not like you can change three players and all of a sudden you've got three fresh impetus to have
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that option. For me, I think and I wrote a piece about this earlier on this week. I think the turning point was the last half an hour against Newcastle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I the turning point for me it was Dan Burns' goal, the second goal against Newcastle being disallowed. I can
Mm.
remember being at the stadium, like just a stadium, like St James's Park, but they hate that one, wouldn't they? I remember being at St James's Park, and quite there, where the press sit is quite close to the dugouts, like just behind Dyche. And when that second goal went in, firstly it was a goal that Newcastle deserved. They were miles
Yeah, yeah,
better than
yeah.
Everton for the first hour of that game. It really did feel a case of when not if they'd get a second. I was watching Deitch and he just disappeared into the dugout and he turned his back on play for, it was probably seconds, but it felt like an eternity. And I would love
Yeah.
to know what was going through his head at that point.
Mm.
And then he then rang for the triple substitution.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I don't think he does that if Everton are only 1-0 down. I don't think he
I think
makes
I
those
said that. Yeah,
changes.
yeah. I said
And
that in my extra time of that. I was very sort of I didn't want to dig Dyche out there, but I did
mm,
say that second goal and the subsequent VAR decision to disallow that goal, I said that it did bail him out because I don't think he would have made those three subs. As you said, I don't think he would
yeah,
have made those
that's
three
it.
subs
So
with the
I
1-0
think
down.
that, obviously what he did do was once the goal got disallowed, he stuck with that decision. But I think what was a case of we're 2-0 down. I'll just do whatever I can to try and just change something. Let's just go
Mm,
for it. I don't think he does that if they say 1-0 down.
I agree, yeah.
Or like I don't think he has that preparation going up to it if he's got time to think about it. But once that goal got disallowed, like the atmosphere changed in the stadium because you kind of felt the home fans go from they're going to win this to wait a minute, this might not be the day because they keep
Mm,
missing so many chances.
yeah.
Bit more belief in the away players. the away end was phenomenal, like it has been so often over recent seasons. And those three changes just changed that game. And then all of a sudden they got out of it. They got a bit of luck with the penalty. Next thing you know, got a decent point, away at a difficult place to
Yeah, yeah.
go. Pickford's had a worldie, which he'd had difficult moments, including against Bournemouth. So all of a sudden you have the almost like the foundation for the performances that then come against Forest and Liverpool that help him. Calvert-Lewin gets his goal, which is then the foundation for
Mm,
maybe the goal against Burnley and the goal against Liverpool. And all of a sudden it just felt like a bit like a hark back to Tottenham at the start of that run, where you got a bit of belief. There was a narrative form in there that was quite troubling for everybody. And yet, because of that last half an hour, when we got into the conference after, the conversation was less about, okay, you've just broken the club record for longest Premier League winless stretch, and more about, you know what, in fairness, it's a tough place to come, 1-0 down, pressure bearing down on you. That last half hour gives you something to build on. And that just changed everything. And obviously, Burnley, the performance after that, Deitch said it was ugly by design. It was a difficult watch.
yeah. Oh God, yeah, it was.
It was. I think when you I wrote this at the start of the season and stopped by this. I think Deitch is the right person for his current situation. But when you compare, when you throw in the 13 games without a win, the manner in which he felt they had to play to beat Burnley, and even then they only got a bit. It was a bit of luck with the goalkeeping mistake for the goal, and then you throw in the 6-0 on top of that. I can completely understand why there were people questioning his future and whether he was the right person
Mm,
for the job at that time. Those are a combination of factors that would put any manager at any club in the Premier League under pressure, and which if we're being perfectly honest, rightly or wrongly, over recent years in Everton, he probably wouldn't have survived that.
no, definitely not. Yeah.
But he did, and I think he's probably he's got the payoff the week later, probably more substantial than he
Mm,
expected.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but they got it, and right now I think he feels very vindicated by everything that he's done. I think it's important not to get complacent because that run and it's still troubling and it's still fresh in the mind and it still shows that things can quickly spiral, if not out of control, but into dangerous territory.
Yeah.
But I do think that the only way that you can judge Deitch and the only way you can judge Everton's players and their performances this season is by looking at the whole thing in context. And the reality is, this is a squad that, the last two seasons, this side has taken its survival battle to the last week of the campaign. And
Mm,
this season, a weaker squad has faced 8 points worth of deductions and is still safe weeks earlier.
yeah.
Um, and I think that you can only really view it in those terms. And if you do, you have to say, in fairness to everybody involved, and that includes Deitch, that's quite a remarkable achievement.
Yeah, definitely. I want to sort of look forward now into the summer
Yeah,
and look at the 777 takeover, and we could just talk about it briefly. I kind of want to know sort of what needs to happen in these next couple of weeks, not what needs to happen leading up into the summer. Do we need to move on from 777, or are they, fit and proper owners? What is this drama at the moment? Because there's been a lot of talk, a lot of speculation this week. I just sort of want to get your thoughts and a little bit of insider knowledge.
yeah. Well, the Everton situation is incredibly difficult because if we're being perfectly honest, it, as it stands, it feels like there isn't necessarily an obvious good outcome for Everton. There are lots of bad ones,
Mm,
but it's very difficult to get excited or optimistic about any of them. Everton, obviously, we know Fahd Moshiri's been trying to sell the club for quite some
mm,
time. He reached the deal with 777 in September, and that came after at least 14 months of looking out there for investments. So Fahd Moshiri clearly wants out. 777 weren't the first ones to come along. Obviously, there were exclusivity deals with the Kaminsky American Group and then with
mm.
MSP, but they fell through. But since that deal was signed in September, it's only been 777. Now, my understanding is that since then, Mashiri has had other offers for the club, offered unsolicited. I think my understanding of his position is his belief that he's always stuck with 777 because he thinks A, they're the only ones that have been able to complete everything.
Yeah,
And B, he still wants, he wants a tiny deal to making sure the stadium gets fully completed, and he
yeah,
believes there'll be the case. Now, what he believes compared to what everybody else believes, and what may be true, is different because obviously the Premier League we're 7 months in and they still yet to be satisfied by 777. They've given them a series of conditions which, if they meet, they'll probably get approval. 777 look like they're capable of meeting most of them, but the big ones, the £158 million or so that the club currently owes to MSP, and that is, if that gets paid off, then it probably gets 777 the green light. But they're clearly having difficulty paying that because they asked for an extension recently, and it's still
Yeah.
ongoing. So obviously the club, Emma, sorry, so many different things. 777 have been putting the money in monthly that has been keeping the club going, and that's still
Mm.
the case. But there are clearly a lot of red flags around them. You only have to look at things that have gone on across their footballing portfolio, but across the rest of their business empire. And there have been lots of difficult stories, and they've been out there since 777 came onto the scene. Some of them
Mm.
have been new, but some of them, a lot have been out there. And I think one of the difficulties that for people like myself is, obviously, it's my job as a journalist to try and provide as much balance and fairness and accuracy
Mm.
as I can. Trying to find a good story around 777 has been very difficult, even if you go to
Yeah.
their people and you go, what is the good story? Tell us, because we point out all these negatives. What you reply? And it's very much been a case of, we'll only really engage once we've got the green light. And I think
Mm.
that's problematic. I think fans deserve better than that. One of the things that I find quite troubling or quite frustrating is the fact that 777 have been, they kept their chest. There are a lot of legitimate questions around funding, about what they want to do with Everton, what they see their vision for Everton is, where it would sit in their football empire, what they would plan to do with the new stadium once it's completed, and in terms of ownership of that. They say that they won't answer those questions out of respect for the regulatory process. I don't think there's any danger of them prejudicing that process by being more open with supporters. And I think
Mm.
that they've missed an opportunity to build goodwill with supporters who, for too long over recent years, have been kept in the dark about serious issues and perhaps not being treated as well as they deserve to have been. 777 could have changed that. They could have come in, they could have offered some reassurances. They wouldn't have had to engage on everything, but
Mm.
perhaps if they'd spoken properly, answered the 14 questions the fan advisory board put through to them, or some of them, then they perhaps could have at least allayed some of the suspicion that currently exists around them. The fact that they haven't done that, to me, is it is a worry, is a concern, because
Mm.
from a PR perspective, it's difficult to see why they wouldn't do that if they had reasonable answers and solutions to some of these big questions. So that backdrop of the ongoing efforts, the ongoing inability to meet the demands of the Premier League, and the consistent negative headlines around them without
Mm.
really anything positive to offset that, both make it troubling. And then the problem you have is, if you take away their money, there's a question around. It's clear that it seems to be clear that Missouri doesn't want to put his own money into keeping the club
Mm.
going forward. Whether he can or not is a different question. We'll probably only know that if he gets forced to do so. But at the moment, it doesn't seem to be an option that he wants to go down. Um, but there's no alternatives that are currently known to us now. It's easy to kind of suggest that we should be saying to Mashiri, find someone else.
Mm.
But unless we know who those other people are, that's it. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't walk in and give £20 million to keep the club going for another month. As big as the concerns I have around 777, it's difficult to rally around an alternative that
Mm.
doesn't currently exist. Now, my understanding is that there are other people that are interested in taking over Everton, that are waiting in the wings, but it's unclear on what basis they're willing to do so.
Mm.
Whether these are people that want to come in and challenge 777, for the deal. Obviously, Mashiri signed contracts with them. If he was to renege on them, he would probably face penalties. But that's not to say that
Yeah.
they wouldn't be worth doing if the right deal came along. But I mean, I've written this. I wrote this in an opinion piece on Saturday. For me, now is the time that, if there is an alternative, now's the time to come forward, because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of skepticism and cynicism and to be honest, fear around 777, and also what would happen if that wasn't to go through. Like I feel like there's an opportunity there for some of the if there was somebody else who's interested, they could probably build a groundswell of support that could probably put Mashiri on, put pressure on Mashiri to consider them if they were to come out public now. If they're not, then obviously then that kind of creates its own suspicions about their motives and whether, for instance, they would be wanting everything to fall apart at Everton and then swoop
Mhm.
in,
Yeah.
once a lot of damage has already been done. And again, would they be the right people to go for Everton? It's difficult to see. So, there's obviously a lot of concern within the fan base and concern with me and everyone else. But all we can do is kind of keep watching at the minute. And I think that kind of, Tuesday was a very strange day, the way in which it played out.
Yeah.
Obviously, this was a story that began with airline passengers being stranded in airports in Australia, but quickly resonated around the world because I think it does have an impact on Everton. They'll,
Yeah. Yeah.
the likes of 777 that might be keen to say, look, this is a different part of the business and doesn't have a knock-on effect. But I think it does. One, in terms of what it suggests about businesses from a wider perspective, and what their situation is and how they're handling things and what their vision is and their capability to be responsible for things. I think that's a concern. And then also, we know that, or it was reported over in Australia that some of those Bonzo airline issues were due to
Yeah.
people who previously supported them starting to maybe call back some of the deals and row back on some of that
Mm.
support. And what does that mean for the Everton deal as well? I can understand why there was concern. Ultimately, the money did come,
Mm.
and Everton, those that means the bills will be paid for the short term. The players were paid this week. That's my understanding. So Everton continue to rely on that drip feed, that live support that's being offered through 777. But it's not a happy place to be. It really isn't a happy place to be.
No, I can imagine. I think us as Evertonians, I think we are just a little bit concerned about, you hear words like insolvency or administration and taking tactical points deductions for administration. I know this is all hearsay and speculation at the moment, but you hear words like that as fans and you do think the worst because you look at the case studies of, Bury, for example, Bolton Wanderers, they're teams that obviously Bury did go into administration, and Bolton were very close to doing that. They're teams that are very close to us in the Northwest. I know a Bolton fan myself, and he was obviously there when that club went through all that. As a fan, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that your club could be on the brink like that. So for me, I think, yeah, it is just about keeping that drip going and just trying to keep Everton alive, and hopefully we get some positive news in the summer. But at the moment, it's quite hard to keep positive on the financial situation, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is from a wider perspective. I mean, I think one thing that's probably important to recognise is that what the latest tranche of 777 money does mean is it takes Everton closer to the opening of the transfer window.
Mm,
Where at the beginning of May now, the transfer window opens on June the 14th. That 16 million pound or so that's come through this week will take Everton, and if not beyond it. And then they probably only got, there'll probably be another conversation over finances at the end of this month as to whether or not 777 then give some more money, or it may well be that a takeover decision is made by that point because the deadline to meet the MSP payback is weeks away, not months.
mm,
But I do think it's important when we talk about things like administration and that to realise that you know once June the 14th comes around and the transfer window opens, we then do enter a period where, as horrible as it is to have to kind of think in terms like this, it does mean that the club can generate significant amount of money
mm.
from external sources in a way that it can't do in the
Yeah.
closed season. Sorry, it can't do during the season. So that isn't a
Mm,
happy situation to be in, and it isn't a sustainable situation to be in, but it perhaps might mean it gives the club a few more opportunities to keep the walls from the door for a little bit
mm.
longer if any further issues do come out.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously you look at the Amadou Onana, Jared Branthwaite players in the squad that could generate that income. And obviously as Evertonians, we don't want to think like that, but I think we are just accepting the reality that they maybe need to be sold to generate that income and just keep the lights on for a few months, as bad as it
Yeah, I mean, I
sounds.
think I think what is the case is that like it's very difficult to look at things like profit and sustainability. There are so many numbers that we don't see.
Mm,
I think we were all a bit surprised at the end of April when the end of March when the accounts came out, and
mm,
whilst we expected there to be losses, for them to be as severe as they were. That was clearly an issue, and it's difficult to see how they can make big improvements on that going into this financial year.
Yeah,
There will be some improvements. The fact that they haven't had to pay, best part of £7 million on sacking managerial staff. The fact that they're not paying £3 million or so in payments for departing board members. The fact that if they can, the higher up the league table they finish, the more money they'll get. So, there are areas in which they'll improve, but what does look to be the case is that Everton are going to face a battle to stay within the profit and sustainability limits. Now that deadline is June the 30th. And I think that's probably the bigger worry at the minute, and that's probably where the sale of a player early in the window
yeah,
might be a necessity. Again, we're dealing in grey areas, and there's still, you know, an outstanding argument between the Premier League and the club over how interest on loans attributed to the stadium were accounted. That argument is over millions of pounds. If Everton lose that, then that means they have even more work to do before June the 30th to try and comply with those regulations, which they failed to do for the last 2 years. If they
yeah,
win that battle, it becomes slightly easier. So I think that's probably the context, a more prescient context around which to discuss player sales. It's almost more for that
yeah,
as much as anything else. So, I mean, what all this does do is, the ownership thing, whether or not that hearing takes place before June the 30th, and a couple of other bits and pieces, it just makes the life of Sean Dyche and Kevin Farrell so much harder as they try and plan for
yeah.
what is undoubtedly going to be a big summer for Finch Farm.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, hopefully we get a positive resolution to the 777 deal and hopefully we go into the season with a strong enough squad to stay in the Premier League. But that's all we've got time for today on the Toffee Blues. Thanks for Joe coming on. I really appreciate it, mate, and your expertise is massively appreciated for all Blues.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening on the Toffee Blues today. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you're thinking ahead of the Luton game on Friday and also what you're thinking ahead of the summer. But that is all for today. I'll see you in a bit.